Hey everybody, it's David Becker, and welcome to the next installment of the tribute to Joe Diorio. It is the 20th anniversary of the release of The Color of Sound, our duo record together, and that was Joe's last recording before his stroke. And I'm joined by one of the founding members of GIT, old friend, great guitarist, great educator, Les Wise. Hey Les, thanks for
How
coming
you
today.
doing? Good to see you, David. Yeah.
I'm great.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the school for a second because you told me that you and Ron Eshtay, you were from New Orleans and you guys met Joe when he was living still in Miami. How did that connection come?
Well, what happened in the French Quarter, Ronnie and I started playing really young because in Louisiana the drinking age is 18, but you can play on Bourbon Street when you're 15 or 16 or 17 or whatever. So it isn't only Bourbon Street, but it's in the French Quarter of New Orleans. But in any case, so Ronnie and I each had a gig at a different club, and we would play. And there's a famous club there owned by Pete Fountain and also Al Hurt. And Al Hurt is a really famous trumpet player from
Yep.
New Orleans. I mean, super famous. They're the two guys. And both of them at one time were on the Lawrence Welk show. So he had a club. And what happened was he wasn't there all the time. And so he had bands come in all the time. And Joe was playing with like they were kind of like a Vegas show band comedy kind of thing.
Okay.
And so
Yep.
what happened, Ronnie, were in the French Quarter. So what happened, Ronnie and I would we'd spend time together, or we might even I might hang out with him for like a week, and then we'd go to work like at well, we'd get up at about 7 o'clock at night, and then we would go to work around 9, and we played from 10 to 2 in the morning, and then we had an hour off, and then we'd play again till 7 in the morning. So this was
Okay.
the weekends. But in any case, so around midnight, we would walk around and do stuff or whatever. Plus, it's pretty hot in French Quarter in the
Right.
middle of the night. And so, say he was playing in the club and we heard him, and we could get in by the backside and yeah, Joe Diorio was playing and doing all the stuff and playing and even though they had to do a bunch of show stuff, and I think there's a picture I have too. I think you've seen it too of Joe with one of these clubs that he was playing, and I'll have to find it later for you. But in any
Yeah,
case,
that's great.
we saw him. Any case, so we hear him play or whatever, and that was the first time we kind of heard who Joe Diorio was. And then over time, eventually, we discovered the Move On Over album, uh,
Okay.
and with Sonny Stitt,
You
and
know that Eddie Harris record, the Exodus of Jazz, that's Joe's first recording.
yeah,
And that was a very big record. That a lot of people don't realize that. That was a very big selling record. And I think Joe was 25 or 26 when he played on that.
yeah, absolutely. And he was down there because which you already know, but for the people that don't, yeah. So then that's when he met Ira Sullivan and all that stuff. And
Right.
Jocko used to come in and sit in at the Unitarian Church. He was down in there, and he would also, but he would come to New Orleans and all those other places because he needed to make money.
Did you play? Did you guys meet and hang and play at that
Oh,
time?
we didn't meet and play. All the other guitar players we did, which you've seen pictures, me and Lenny Bro and all those people
Yeah.
came through town, and we all played, but we never with Joe because they were in that show group thing. I don't know if Joe really when he was there with the thing. I don't know if he went around trying to meet people. At the time he was playing, I mean, musicians came all the time through there, and not only in that club, but they would just show up. Like I remember once around the same time as Joe Diorio, one of the guys comes around and goes, there's these really two weird uh, brothers, and they look really weird, but they're incredible players. And it was Edgar Winters and Johnny Winters
Oh, okay.
come through with some band or some kind of thing, and then we went to hear them, and they were like on another planet, ahead of
Yeah.
the time. So that, and then Jeff Baxter and all that would come all the time. We'd jam. He'd come to New Orleans all the time.
You guys saw Joe play, but when did you actually meet him? Did you introduce yourself to him at all, or did you
Well,
just
I don't know if we did at that time, but I met him again. I think maybe in New Orleans another time he was there, and I said hello and all that kind of stuff. But then when he came to California.
so how did Joe get the gig with GIT? Do you
Well,
know?
what happened is that Joe had saw Ronnie hanging out someplace, right? Joe and Ronnie started playing together, like
Oh,
because Joe was trying to get work, you see.
right.
that's why when when Mox tells that story of he shows up at GIT with Howard Roberts, and then they have these two other guys that they have Joe and Ronnie there, and that so that's kind of how he got into the GIT thing, which was really early
I
on.
remember Joe told me that in that very first year, Joe Pass came to do a seminar, and there was probably 40 or 50 students total.
Yeah.
And he said that Joe Pass looked out in the audience and said to Joe Diorio, "Where are all these guys going to work, man?" And so,
Yeah. Oh no, that's excellent. And Joe did stuff like that.
when did you start then at the school at GIT?
Well, what happened is this: just before me, they hired Jackie King.
Okay.
So Jackie King is a left-handed classical guitar player that's a really good jazz player, perfect pitch, played with Willie Nelson and all,
Nelson, yep, yep.
really good player. And and so what happened was he was at the school too. But what happened is Pat Hicks and them, they ran out of money. They couldn't pay the teachers. And so Jackie King, after a month and a half, quit.
Okay.
He left. And then what happened is Pat Hicks went to Tommy and goes, "We're out of money. We need some money." So he wrote him a check. And they promised, Pat Hicks promised Don and Ronnie and Joe a percentage of the school.
Yes, that I know.
So they promised a percentage of the school, but now they were short. So Ronnie goes, "Get Les in and have them do a workshop." And the
Mhm.
first group that I did the workshop for, and that was Jamie Finley, and that was
Mhm.
and all of them, and Jennifer, and everybody were in that first group. And then so that's when I coupled together with this stuff, and then we started from there. So that was where the point where that went, and then the school went on from there.
Yeah, I went there in March of '80. That's when I started, and that was still in the Wax Museum building there on.
Yeah, yeah, because and what happened was before that, and actually I did a workshop before in 78, then 79, but they were, other than the other one, they were in 555 Hollywood Boulevard, which
That's
if
just
you go down Hollywood Boulevard all the way to where it goes on the freeway, the complete opposite. They were in that building, and in there was Steve Lynch,
yep.
Jennifer, and all of them were going to school there, and that was the first more physical school for that. They wanted to create a bass school
Right.
because Pat Hicks had got the idea for doing the bass school. So I played some gigs with Bob Magnuson. Okay.
Okay.
And so what happened, and not that he didn't play with some of the other people and then later everybody, but I said
Mhm.
I played with this bass player and he's really good, and he's really good acoustic bass player, right? And so eventually they hired Bob for sure. But before that, they had hired Chuck Rainey.
Oh, Chuck was okay.
Yeah, so Chuck Rainey joined the curriculum, and he was there. The only thing is that they had no curriculum for the bass, so they
Okay.
asked me to go. They asked me to go help him write the curriculum. So I helped him write it. Chuck was really great. So while we're doing that, so that was the building before. Then, like you said, when you started, they moved up the street and they got the Wax Museum. And then eventually, of course, after the Wax Museum, they had to expand, and then it was getting too crazy. And then, of course, if I go
About
far,
the Max Factor. Yeah. I was in Pat's office the day that he was discussing buying that building.
yeah,
I had a meeting with him because I was setting up to do the first concert as a former student, now as an artist, with my first album, Long Peter Matson, at the old school there on Hollywood Boulevard. And we were discussing the details and all that. And he said, "Yeah, I'm in the process of trying to buy this building over here, the old Max Factor building, to move the school because we're running out of space." This time period of when the school started, basically when you got there to like the early '80s, before it really exploded, as being this really important time for the school, for a lot of the people who went there. It was a very special time, which is kind of capsuled in these conversations we've been having. Maybe you want to reflect a little bit about how you, as an instructor with Joe and Ron and everybody, how you felt about it at that time.
okay, well, that's a good point. Well, in the beginning, too, is because another thing is that Howard Alden and all them, and also Keith Wyatt, became,
Hmm.
when I joined the thing, they became student teachers. So they
Right.
would kind of walk up, more like monitors, they would walk up through those crazy labs. But so in the beginning, a couple of things. One, there was like 30 or 40 students, right? There's hardly any students. I mean, but no one was thinking about that. It's just a school and it has a number of students. But over the time, two things happened. One, we had the Howard Roberts curriculum, right? But not
Mhm.
all of it. It wasn't completely developed yet. And then the other thing too is that over the Ronnie and all of us were able to augment that curriculum, so we could augment it with our own stuff. So we filled in. So it looked like this,
Right.
and when we were all there, it filled in. And when a student showed up, it looks like it was totally filled. But we augmented a lot of that in the beginning, and then it
Right.
got more sophisticated, and then it became the core curriculum. So back
Right.
in that time, there was certainly always a chance to help the students and all that. And they were so open and so much sharing, because even in the 555 building, I remember when Joe did the intervallic design book, right? And so he does the intervallic design book. And Jennifer, when I was hanging out late at night with Steve Lynch, who was also hanging out with Jennifer, they were hanging out together, right?
Yep.
Jennifer came to me one night, like 7 o'clock at night, and she goes, Les, what if I took Joe Diorio's intervallic book but did wood tapping? I said, yeah, that'd be a good idea. So the main thing, all those germs were, I mean, everything germinated from there, all the incredible stuff.
That openness, I think, is really what, for me, was so important, because I remember there was always an open door. I could walk into Pat Hicks' office, I could walk into Joe's, I could walk into yours or Donnie or anybody. And even when Pat Martino was there at the very tail end of my time, you could just knock on the door and, hey, Pat, let's hang and talk. And there wasn't this structure of like you have to sign in and you have to, have a badge and stuff. You would just come in and you could share all that knowledge, which I think was really a great breeding ground for all of us. And too, I think it's a testament to, as instructors, you guys were able to, as you said, there wasn't a curriculum that you had to teach. You all put something to it. So there was a constant growth
Yeah.
from you looking at Joe, Joe looking at you, or you looking at Ronnie, and developing this thing in real time, which I think is very special.
Yeah, and to your point, that you summed that up perfectly. Yeah, everybody we shared, it was a big family of stuff, and people were so open to, just like you said, coming in and sharing the stuff that they had, or students could ask for anything. Yeah, it was totally open because of not being a university and not having to follow the state guidelines that connected to classical music, that connected to the other. That, yeah, no, it was just incredible. And we could share stuff, or we could hang out or do things, or, well, in the days like Steve Freeman, when they came later too, they go, oh, Les, why don't you come over to our apartment? So I just go over there, and like Sonny Paul too, he had
Yeah.
a little apartment behind 555, that
Hmm.
building. And so Les, like, drop by after school, which I'd always stay till like 8 o'clock at night. I go around, and he had a Doberman, and I opened the thing, and the Doberman bit me. So Sonny laughs to that day for this stuff. But yeah, we would just go and hang out all the time.
For me, having met Joe and hanging with him, there was never a structure to the lesson because I just would hang and we would play. Joe recognized how I learned. And I think that's an important part of being able to, as an instructor or a teacher, to see what the student's all about, not just giving them one size fits all.
You said it, and that was the big thing. And you're also talking about musicians. So think about this. There's a couple of things. If you take GIT and now you take this, it's 1955, okay? And let's say it isn't GIT, the building, but it's an apartment building in New York. And there's 100, which 150 musicians live there. Everybody's struggling for gigs. But every time somebody gets a record, right, there's only one guy on the third floor that has the album, and they go and sit and listen to it, and everybody shared, and that's what GIT was. The one thing, Joe always focused on the music, because that's what musicians did.
Absolutely.
And then later on, Joe and I would talk about something, because when they created Echelon, do you know what that is?
Hmm.
Echelon are these antennas in England that can record everything in the electromagnetic spectrum. And they
Right.
also have those radio telescopes that focus in the universe. So the first thing is, a typical black hole is B flat, 11 octaves below middle C. So you got middle C, B flat, go 11 octaves down, and that's a black hole. And so
Yeah.
there's actually notes out there. So in any case, back to the point of the teaching and students and feeling. So with Joe, it was always focusing on the music and the feeling and the other stuff. And so I think that was the beauty of it. And for me, helped me in other ways too. Getting to the Joe thing with the part where he's always helping and spiritual, and you connected with him, is it because Paramahansa Yogananda. So he was in self-realization, and Paramahansa Yogananda was in California. I mean, he had died in the 50s, but self-realization. So he had me join self-realization, and we took lessons every week, and I meditated for years. And then he was with Swami Vivekananda and
Right.
others. But in any case, so we would talk about the spiritual thing and connecting in that way too. So Joe just had the getting also to your point of the whole school thing. It was just all about that giving and the spirit and helping people and getting them in touch with themselves. Uh, while instead of the thing where people, wear their badge of honor, is that naming all these crazy theory stuff, which we know in incredible
No,
detail, but it's
hits the nail on the head. Yeah. Because Joe, I think, well, everybody collectively, if you even go to Howard Roberts, Howard's system of teaching, he had this curriculum with super chops and things like that, but he also had that thing about talking about how we learn and studying things with, how does the brain work and how do we perceive things? That's not what you're going to get at a conservatory that's going to talk about this scale and that
yeah, yeah,
theoretical thing. So I think in that perspective, it gave us a whole different way to learn and to be able to explore. And Joe's openness to that was really important because if you look, his reach to the students, they're not a bunch of bebop players. You got people like Steve Lynch and Jennifer Batten
yeah.
who have, and then myself and everybody in between who took Joe's concept of whatever it is that he was bringing to the table, and it went far beyond the notes.
Yeah, exactly. It transcends the styles because first thing, whether you play jazz or fusion or whatever style, they're actual ways of life. If somebody goes, I play jazz guitar or rock guitar, that's also an entire lifestyle with gear and all kinds of stuff and tone and thing. It's
Right,
not the notes and now I sound like a rock player or whatever. And Howard too, because Howard also had friends like this professor at a university in Arizona when he was
right.
there, and they would have those discussions. But yeah, yeah, Howard was the same thing like Joe. There's some part where they would transcend the notes in the paper. But Howard Roberts one day we're talking and he goes, "So you know when you get in an automobile accident?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "And then everything goes in slow motion."
Hmm.
And he said, "Your brain is actually seeing the accident before it happens."
Right.
And so when he said that at first, and it was really early on, and I go, hmm. Now, years later, having friends and studying quantum physics and all this stuff, but before that, I go, really? Is that true? And so Howard was incredible with that kind of thing of how to learn because you needed that. You need to be able to get the stuff into your system and be able to play it. And yeah, and Joe too. Joe, the heartfelt stuff and played. Howard Roberts had those things. It was so precision. I mean, that must have been so fun for you guys when you were there to be
It
part.
was, and I'll tell you a story that Howard told us. He said he went on a recording session early in his career, and he was late to the session, and the copyist, was late bringing the stuff to the stand, and he looked at the notes on the page,
Yeah,
and there were so many notes. He said he knew then, and he knew now, speaking at that time, that it would take him 2 weeks to learn to play that. And he said they counted the tune off. He closed his eyes. And he played it perfectly.
yeah, yeah.
And he said, had somebody coughed or made a mistake, he never would have been able to play it again.
Yeah, that's in the moment. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That was one of those moments that, resonated with me when I realized, you know, that there's more to it than just the nuts and bolts of A minor and C major and all that. But when is the first time that you actually got to play one-on-one with Joe Diorio?
Well, what happened was a couple of things. You'd see some pictures where we'd play in the school. Somebody needed something happen, so we did that. So I can't tell the exact moment of that. But Joe and I, especially after Roger did maybe some of his books, not the ones, because originally Joe, when he came to town, he called Joe Pass on the phone, and Joe Pass hooked him up with Dale Zdenek. And
Right.
Dale Zdenek is the one that got those first books out there, but the REH books, we would do seminars all over. So we would go to well, we did in Seattle. We did in Santa. In fact, here's the story in Santa Barbara. We go to Santa Barbara, And we're teaching for like 3 days or whatever, and it's fun, and we just had a great time. We would play and do stuff, and doing all the stuff and the teaching and the other things, and then and then towards the end of the thing, uh, they ask what the students want to do. So, and there was some younger people there, and so this one this one guy in the back of the room goes, "Look, I want to be a rock player." Okay.
Okay.
So Joe has just been teaching, but in a very spiritual way, Boolean calculus, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm up on the stage, and we're teaching and doing stuff, and Joe goes, "Look, the one thing you got to be careful with. In order to do that, you need a lot of gear, and you need big amps and all the stuff, and it's super expensive, and whatever. Just the reality, Joe's reality." So after the seminar, because we were there for like 3 days, we're standing outside in Santa Barbara, and it was near State Street, but it was near the water. And the dad pulls up in a Rolls Royce, opens the hood, and puts his guitar in it. And you know how Joe had that one eye that kind of looked
Yeah.
at me, looked like this, and we were, oh my God! And then just reality set in. You never know where the
You never know.
cosmic is bringing you. Well, he moved different places, right? Because when he was near more Dana Point or down in that area, and then he moved farther down where that club was, the White House, where he wanted to move farther down. But also my girlfriend and Myrna, before she changed her name
And
too,
then,
because of the spiritual stuff she was studying and the other worldly things she was on. Then she changed her name, but so they had a lot in common. So they would hang out all the time, and we would hang out and tell stories and stuff. And then sometimes when Joe was doing the 2 week period, or maybe once a month he came, is that then that's when we would hang out late at night, 9 or 10. I don't know. We had so many discussions from the late 70s, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, forever. And so, yeah, but in any case, that was it. And of course, Joe is incredible. The time is incredible. And I know we went up to Seattle and play in clubs and other places where we did seminars. And yeah, and he was just, yeah, it was just great and a great experience for me, and such a high level musician, but so easy. Yeah, yeah, it's just, yeah, just an unbelievable experience. And how about for you too, when you would sit in the room
Well,
and do it in the,
yeah, I mean, the thing about with Joe is that when I met him, the first thing he said to me is just play. And I just played whatever I played.
yeah,
And he just said, just keep doing what you're doing. And then he took his guitar. So he went
yeah,
FA,
yeah,
and he
that, that,
chord.
that sound
And
like that. Yeah,
I didn't even know what chord that was. And that's it. He showed me this Stella by Starlight chord melody in the moment that
yeah,
I honestly think that he just came up with it on the fly.
yeah, yeah,
He just said, I'm going to give this to you, kid, and you're going to work with this the rest of your life.
yeah,
And now fast forward to the recording of The Color of Sound. We did a version of Stella, which goes in 50 million directions. And
yeah,
when we
yeah.
recorded that, the only take we did, and Richard Smith from USC, I'd invited him to the studio because Joe and I were there for two
Cool.
months.
Richard's super cool. Yeah,
Yeah, and so Richard came with a guitar player from Italy. I don't remember his name, but I didn't know they were there. And Joe and I are in this, we're recording, looking, facing each other. When we finished that take, I looked over in the recording booth, and I could see Richard and the guy jumping up and down, applauding because of what we just played. And so, but that was that moment. I could remember going back to that day that Joe showed me that chord and said, here, without explaining what it is. He didn't say this is 813 flat nine, and you've got the root on top. And he
yeah,
didn't say any of that stuff. He just started to play things.
yeah.
And then I would just come and hang and play. The end of his life, when we were talking during the pandemic, I wrote a book. I don't know if I sent it to you. It's called Etudes You Can Use. They're
Uh-huh.
all open triad etudes. They're very short, and they're all Joe Diorio inspired, Bach inspired.
Yeah.
And I was working on that, and I would call Joe every day. And I go, Joe, listen to this one, man. And he'd go, oh, David, that's a good one, man. You got to write that down. And so he was kind of the ghost editor of my book because I would always run through whatever I was working on with him over
Oh,
the
that's
phone.
fantastic. And plus that connection that you have together, and then by connecting and doing it, even the benefit you did, for the
Yeah. Yeah, the concert we did for
Just
Joe.
unbelievable, like you said. Yeah,
I played with just about every guitar player. John Abercrombie. I did a week with Larry Coryell,
yeah,
a whole bunch of people, and I mean, everybody has something that they offer, and you learn a lot about the guitar player when you do a duo. But I have to say, I have never played with a guitar player like Joe Diorio.
yeah, yeah,
And his influence and his output, what he was doing way back then, is far beyond anybody
yeah,
that's even alive today.
yeah.
Just to be able to have had that relationship to witness that, not as as a student or a player, just as an observer, is really incredible. You
Well,
know,
because with your first, a couple of things. When you met him, how old was Joe?
Joe was 44,
Yeah,
45.
exactly. So those great musicians, because we could go back to they're different players like Pat Martino. I could go on with Jimmy Rainey, all of them, right? But
Yeah,
all and look at Joe Pass when he went in Synanon
yeah,
to recover. He was 28 years old,
yeah, yeah,
already a legend. So Joe's part of those group of people that had already been playing, and by the time they hit 30, they're really playing. It's not
yeah.
like maybe or something.